In 1957, a sheriff walked into a quiet farmhouse in Plainfield, Wisconsin, and stumbled out moments later, vomiting. What he saw inside has haunted his nightmares ever since. The air was still, the house silent, but what lurked behind those doors would become one of the most disturbing discoveries in American history. They called him the Boogeyman, a recluse, a loner who talked to no one, who lived in the shadows of grief and madness. His name was Ed Gein. In a town where nothing ever happened, no one could have imagined the evil growing in that rotting farmhouse. Not even the police, who thought they were just investigating a missing person. But what they found inside was beyond anything they trained for. This man, this soft-spoken, polite loner, would go on to inspire Norman Bates in Psycho, Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. But the real story? The true horror? It's worse than anything Hollywood dared to show, because hidden in that house, in drawers, behind doors, and even stitched into the furniture, was a truth the world couldn't handle. A woman's face turned into a mask, a belt made of nipples, chairs wrapped in human skin, a box of vulvas preserved like souvenirs. This wasn't fiction. This was reality, born from isolation, death, and obsession. And now, after decades of myths and rumors, we pull back the curtain. This is the true story of Ed Gein. And for the first time, we're showing the parts that the public was never meant to see. Plainfield, Wisconsin, just a dot on the map. A town where the streets were quiet, the doors were rarely locked, and everybody knew your name. It was the kind of place where nothing truly bad ever happened, until it did. And at the center of that quiet life was Ed Gein. A little off, sure. He did odd jobs around town, repaired machines, shoveled snow. People thought he was harmless, just a soft-spoken man who kept to himself. He had a strange laugh, odd eyes, and he never invited anyone over. But hey, Plainfield folks didn't pry. What most didn't know was that Ed lived alone on a crumbling farmhouse, cut off from the world after his mother died. No electricity, no heat, just rotting walls, silence, and something dark festering inside. After his brother's mysterious death in a fire and his mother's passing, Ed shut the world out. The house stopped being a home. It became something else, a place where grief morphed into madness. Then the town changed, slowly, subtly. Women started to disappear. First one, then another, always older, always alone. At first, people thought they'd left town or run off. But as the list grew, so did the unease. Whispers began to spread. Something was wrong. Something was watching. Locals told stories of strange smells drifting from Ed's farm, of shadows behind dirty windows, of flickering lights at odd hours. And sometimes, just sometimes, people swore they heard screams in the middle of the night. But it was easier to believe it was all in their heads. After all, this was Plainfield, not some horror movie. Then, on November 16th, 1957, it happened. Bernice Worden, the town's hardware store owner and one of the most respected women in Plainfield, vanished. Her store was found unlocked, the cash register open, a trail of blood led out the back, and the last name in her receipt book, Ed Gein. The quiet man, the loner, the one they never thought could hurt a fly. And suddenly all the stories, the whispers, the unease, they weren't just rumors, they were warnings. What was inside that farmhouse? November 16th, 1957. A cold morning in Plainfield, and the town's rhythm felt off. Something was wrong. At Bernice Worden's hardware store, the lights were on, but the door hung open. A blood trail led across the floor and out the back. Her son, Frank Worden, a deputy sheriff, arrived first. He knew his mother would never leave like this. On the counter lay the final receipt she'd written, 1 gallon of antifreeze. The customer's name? Ed Gein. The town was stunned. Ed? No way. He's odd, sure, but not dangerous. Some folks refused to believe it. Others suddenly remembered the flickering lights, the terrible smells, the unease they'd buried for years. Police headed to Ed's farm just before nightfall. The place sat in ruins, lost in shadows and weeds. The wooden steps moaned under their boots. The front door creaked open. Inside, nothing. No voices, no movement, just silence, thick and rotting. As the officers stepped further in, the cold air turned sour. Something was wrong, deeply, horribly wrong. But it wasn't the house that stopped them first. It was the shed out back. The flashlight beam caught something hanging. It was Bernice Worden. She had been cut open and strung up like a deer, headless, drained, skinned. The sheriff dropped to his knees. Some officers ran outside and vomited. One man never spoke of that night again. And yet, that was only the beginning. What they found inside the house was far worse. Behind the boarded-up windows and the piles of filth, the Gein farmhouse was a macabre museum. There were bowls made from skulls, chairs upholstered in human skin, a belt crafted from nipples, lampshades made of human faces. On the stove, something once living had been cooked. In a box, the face of another missing woman stared back. Ed wasn't just killing. He was collecting, crafting, wearing his victims. Inspired by his dead mother, he was trying to become her. Literally, Plainfield would never be the same. The Boogeyman wasn't just real. He had been walking their streets, buying groceries, and offering to help shovel snow. And yet one haunting question lingered for everyone in town. How long had he been doing this? And how many more were never found? The house was no home. It was a tomb, a shrine of horrors hidden in plain sight. As officers walked through Ed Gein's crumbling farmhouse, their flashlights cut through dust and darkness to reveal what no one could have imagined. Human skulls rested on the bedposts. A kitchen bowl was carved from a cranium. Chairs were upholstered in flesh, soft, aged, stitched like leather. Hanging from the walls were masks, not rubber, not plastic, but faces, real ones, carefully preserved, worn. Gein confessed without a fight. In his flat, emotionless tone, he told them he had robbed graves, dozens of them. Under moonlight, he would dig, lift, peel, and carry pieces home. But some faces, some parts, didn't come from graves. They came from the women of Plainfield who had vanished. He hadn't just killed. He had collected, crafted, transformed. One mask he wore around the house. Another he saved. A vest made of a woman's torso, complete with breasts. Gloves made of hands. A box of noses. A belt made of nipples. The most chilling of all, a full-body suit of human skin, stitched together piece by piece. It had been started, not finished. His plan? To become his mother. Not metaphorically, physically. This wasn't just murder. It was ritual, obsession, resurrection. He'd preserved her room, untouched, for over a decade. Spoke to her as if she were still alive. Everything he did was to bring her back, or become her. Neighbors recalled how strange he'd become after her death, but no one imagined this. No one thought to look, because Ed was quiet, harmless, a bit odd, but helpful. The kind of man who'd babysit your kids or help fix your roof. But inside his home, death lived, and it wore a smile stitched from someone else's lips. Now the question burned in everyone's mind. What made Ed Gein this way? And why did no one stop him? Ed Gein wasn't born a monster. He was made. His childhood was a cage built by fear, fire, and fanaticism. His mother, Augusta Gein, was a deeply religious woman, not loving, but tyrannical. She told Ed that women were evil, that the world was full of sin, and that God was watching, always judging. She isolated him from other kids, forbid friendships, and beat into him a twisted view of right and wrong. She was his only friend, his only world. When Ed's father died and his older brother was mysteriously found dead during a brush fire, under suspicious circumstances, it was just Ed and Augusta. And when she died of a stroke in 1945, Ed said he lost everything. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He sealed her bedroom shut, leaving it frozen in time, untouched, like a shrine. The rest of the house rotted away, but her room stayed perfect. From then on, something in Ed snapped, but it wasn't loud. It wasn't sudden. It was quiet rot, spreading from the inside. Neighbors pitied him. He was shy, polite, fixed their roofs, watched their kids, laughed awkwardly. He was weird, yes, but harmless, they thought. Authorities ignored him. He had no police record, no visitors, no trouble. But behind closed doors, he was building something, and no one noticed. His crimes weren't chaotic. They were crafted, measured, surgical. Skins tanned like leather, bones preserved, faces mounted. And while police officially linked him to 2 murders, the truth runs deeper. Grave records didn't match. Body parts didn't add up. Locals whispered of more missing women, of strange lights at night. Of the screams they brushed off, how many bodies were really in that house? 10, 20, more. Some officers say evidence was too disturbing to share. Some photos were never released, and some pieces didn't even seem human anymore. Which leads to the final, most terrifying question. What was Ed Gein truly building? Because there's one secret buried in that farmhouse that was hidden from the public for decades, until now. What was it? When police finally opened every drawer, every chest, every crawl space in Ed Gein's house, they didn't release everything they found. Some items were too disturbing, too detailed, too inhuman. Internal reports sealed away from the public described something beyond serial murder. Ed wasn't just taking lives, he was building identities, crafting something he believed could bring the dead back, or become them himself. Officers documented full-body suits, pieced together with surgical precision from women's skin. Not just masks, not just gloves, but entire torsos, breasts, faces, even genitalia, sewn into wearable shapes. Some were painted, preserved, dressed. He was preparing to wear them. Off the record, multiple officers said Gein described becoming a woman, but not any woman. His mother, his goddess, his ghost. They said he danced in the moonlight in these suits, praying to feel her voice again. But none of this was shown in court. None of it made the headlines. The police sealed the most graphic items. Photos went into restricted archives, marked too graphic for public release. Prosecutors said they would damage jurors. Reporters were warned off. Why? Because the line between horror and madness had been crossed. The court saw murder, but the officers saw transformation, obsession, worship. And still, rumors say some things were never logged at all, just locked away, whispered about in bars, passed down in stories. Did Ed Gein stop at graves? Did he test on living victims? Were there more missing women who were never linked to him? To this day, the full inventory has never been released. Even in FOIA requests, some photos are blacked out. Some files are missing. Some officers who entered that house never spoke of it again. Because the horror of Ed Gein wasn't just the killing. It was the intention, the detail, the calm with which he stitched, shaped, and stored human lives like fabric. He didn't see death. He saw material, tools, pieces, and maybe the scariest part isn't what was found. It's what wasn't. What does it say about us that we looked away? Ed Gein's house wasn't just a crime scene. It was a museum of death. A twisted shrine to decay, grief, and madness. Inside its rotting walls, furniture was stitched from skin, bowls carved from skulls, and masks formed from faces that once smiled, spoke, and lived. But the real horror? He wasn't collecting trophies. He was building something. Piece by piece, he was trying to remake one person, his mother, the woman who raised him in fear, flooded his world with fire and brimstone sermons, and taught him that all other women were wicked. When she died, he lost his compass and tried to rebuild it in flesh. Ed didn't kill for pleasure. He killed and dug up graves to resurrect. In his mind, he wasn't ending lives. He was stitching one back together. Over time, people called him a monster, the Boogeyman. But that label almost makes him less terrifying, because the real Ed Gein wasn't a creature from folklore. He was a man who smiled at neighbors, fixed their windows, and then went home to sew human skin by candlelight. He didn't just break laws, he broke definitions of sanity, humanity, death, and identity. Gein is remembered as evil, but he's also a warning of what happens when trauma is left untreated, when isolation grows unchecked, and when pain turns into obsession. Every item in that house wasn't just gruesome, it was stolen history, a part of someone's daughter, sister, friend, taken forever. They called him the Boogeyman to feel safe. But Ed Gein wasn't a legend. He was real. And so is the darkness he left behind. The house is gone now, burned to the ground by angry locals who couldn't bear to see it standing. A place where unspeakable horrors unfolded behind dusty curtains. They hoped fire could erase the memory, but ash can't bury truth. Because what Ed Gein did still lingers. In police reports locked away, in small-town whispers, in the nightmares of those who saw that house with their own eyes. You can burn a building, but you can't burn what it left behind. Like, subscribe, and share, because some truths aren't meant to be buried. And now it's your turn to speak. What do you think the police never told us about Ed Gein? What secrets stayed hidden in those restricted files? Drop your theory in the comments. Let's dig into the dark together.